Welcome back to the deep dive. Usually when we sit down to do this, we have a very specific target in mind.
Right.
We're looking at a market shift or a new piece of tech or some, geopolitical event.
Mm.
We have this stack of research and we're trying to figure out what's happening out there.
The world is the puzzle, and we're trying to find the solution key. That's the standard model.
Exactly. The world is the object. But the material we're looking at today, it completely flips that. It inverts it. We're not looking at the world.
We're looking at the lens.
We're looking at the lens we use to see the world. We were diving into a framework called Reflective Humanism. And I have to say, going through these notes, it felt less like reading philosophy and more like looking at the blueprints for an operating system, but like an operating system for human consciousness.
That's a very, very accurate way to put it. It's a kind of internal cognitive engineering. And it's tricky because the text uses these soft, almost poetic words, love, gratitude, but then it defines them with the precision of a physics equation.
That's exactly what grabbed me. It's engineering disguised as poetry. But before we get into the mechanics of it all, I want to start with the question that just anchors this entire thing. And honestly, it's a big one.
It is.
The source material asks, where does meaning come from? And then, does the world already have meaning before we even look at it?
That is the fundamental question, isn't it? And I think if we're honest, most of us just run on a default setting there. We assume the world is a stage set.
Right. It's solid. It's fixed. It was there before I woke up.
And we just walk onto the stage and we label things. That's a tree. That's a scary dog. That's a bad email. We think meaning is just a sticky note we slap onto a reality that's already there.
The label maker model of life. I see it, I label it, I move on.
Precisely. It feels efficient. But the core thesis of reflective humanism it blows that up immediately. It suggests that the world, at least a world of meaning, doesn't exist before observation.
Okay, I want to pause on that. I need to push on that a little because that sounds dangerously close to, nothing is real, which feels, well, not very helpful, is it?
I get that reaction. It sounds really abstract. But it's not saying the tree doesn't exist as, physical matter. It's saying that the meaning of the tree, is it shelter? Is it lumber? Is it sacred? That meaning requires a very specific mechanism to come into being.
And that's where the engineering comes in.
That's the engineering. The text uses these physics metaphors. Two concepts, really. Spare capacity and interference.
Right, interference. Now, in my everyday life, interference is noise. It's static. It's a dropped call. It's something I want to avoid.
In standard English, yes. But in physics, interference is what happens when two waves meet. They overlap. And they create a new, more complex pattern. This framework argues that meaning is that interference pattern. It's what's created when your consciousness meets the world. But, and here's the catch, you can't have interference if there's no space for the waves to meet.
You need a buffer zone.
Exactly. You need what the Japanese source text calls yohaku, spare capacity. If you have zero spare capacity, you don't get interference. You get a collision.
A collision versus an interference, I think a lot of us can feel that difference. When I'm stressed, back-to-back meetings, doom scrolling, I'm not interfering with the world. I'm just crashing into it.
And that crash is violent. It's exhausting. And that really brings us to the core problem the research identifies. Why are we crashing? It critiques our observational stance.
Okay.
We talked about the label maker, but there's a deeper issue. It's the difference between seeing the world as a point versus an orbit.
This part was fascinating. It really challenges our need to know exactly where we are at all times.
We obsess over it. I am successful. I am failing. This is good. This is bad. We're always trying to freeze our lives into a single dot on a graph so we can measure it.
It feels safer that way, though, doesn't it? If I can define my position, even if it's a bad position, I feel like I'm in control.
It feels safe, but it's lethal to meaning. The argument here is that human recognition shouldn't be a fixed point. It should be a vector, which has direction, and a gradient, which is a rate of change.
So it's about the slope, not the specific coordinate.
Exactly. It's the difference between a photo and a video. If you freeze the world to judge it, you kill its movement. But if you see it as an orbit, a gradient, you preserve what they call the phase of things. And when we try to force this moving world into a fixed box, that's when we get something the text calls transparent pain.
Transparent pain. That phrase really stood out. It sounds poetic, but they mean something very technical. Why transparent?
Because we don't see it. We look right through it. It's not a sharp pain like a cut. It's a friction signal. It's the heat generated between the external world, which is nonlinear, messy, always changing, and our internal OS, which is desperately trying to draw straight lines.
So the pain isn't because the world is bad. The pain is because my map doesn't match the territory.
Yes. It's a dashboard light, a warning signal. It shows us we're only feeling the impact of the collision. We are hitting the world instead of dancing with it. And because it's transparent, we blame the world. We say life is hard. But this text argues, no, your OS is just outdated.
Okay, so if the goal is to stop colliding and start dancing, or interfering in this positive sense, we need to upgrade the OS. We need to understand what consciousness actually is in this model. And, well, the definition here isn't what you'd find in a textbook.
No, it is radical. Consciousness is not a subject. It's not a little person in your head driving the bus.
Right.
It's defined as a field of generation. It is the interference pattern itself.
That's a trippy thought.
Right.
I'm not the thing creating the pattern. I am the pattern.
In this model, yes. You're the fringes that rise up through the act of observation.
Okay, let's get practical. How do we do that? Because it sounds great on a poster, but what about a Tuesday morning when I'm late for work?
Yeah.
The source material breaks it down into a kind of 4-step formula.
It does. This is the how-to. Step 1 is recursion, or kancho.
The translation is contemplation, but the text is pretty clear. This isn't just daydreaming.
Not at all. It's a technical operation. It's the act of watching yourself watch. Stepping back 1 inch from the screen, this recursion is what creates step 2. Spare capacity, the yohaku.
The buffer we were talking
A
about.
buffer. This is the most critical step. It stops the system from crashing under immediate reaction, and when you have that buffer, you get step 3, interference.
And that leads to the final step, a phase jump. This is a physics term, right? Like water becoming steam.
Precisely. It's a nonlinear shift. You don't just get more information, you shift to a whole new state. The argument is that true meaning doesn't just help you understand a problem better, it shifts your entire state relative to the problem.
There's a line in the notes that really it summed it all up for me. Meaning is not the result of understanding. Meaning is the trace left by interference.
That is the core takeaway. You don't think your way to meaning. You create the conditions for interference, you create the space, and meaning is the footprint that gets left behind.
They use this analogy I found really helpful. The architect and the gardener.
It's a beautiful model. Consciousness needs both. The architect is the structural side. Ordering, extracting, building the trellis. We're pretty good at being architects in the modern world.
We love our spreadsheets.
We do, but you can't live in just a trellis. It's a barren structure. You need the gardener. The gardener is intuition, life, that flash of insight, and crucially, the gardener has to wait. You can't make a plant grow by pulling on it.
And that's the hard part, isn't it? The waiting. I think most of us try to architect the plant. We try to strategize our own intuition.
And you kill it. The two modes, architect and gardener, have to resonate. They have to alternate. All architect and your world is rigid and dead. All gardener, and it's just chaos. You need both to create a stable interference pattern.
So let's bring this right down to earth. What happens when this system breaks? When that spare capacity just vanishes?
We enter what the text calls the flat world.
The flat world. And not in the literal sense.
No, the depth of experience becomes flat. It's a paradox. When we lose the buffer, information actually increases. We're flooded with data, but meaning is lost.
Because there's no room for interference.
Exactly. We can explain everything, we have all the facts, but the world stops being a place where meaning is born.
It feels like everything just becomes content.
Content without context, content without resonance. And that's why the text insists that contemplation is a technology. It calls it a contemplative engine. It's not a spiritual luxury. It's a technical requirement to stop the world from flattening out.
This idea of distance brings up a really interesting ethical point. The ethics of distance, which is not what I usually think of as ethics.
It's spatial ethics. The rule is simple. Touching, but not touching too much.
Explain that, because not touching too much sounds like being detached or cold.
It's not detachment, it's respect for the buffer. Think about a relationship. If you invade someone's consciousness, if you try to force them to see things exactly your way, you destroy their spare capacity.
You destroy the space where resonance can even happen.
Exactly. You have to maintain that distance to allow the other person to be a world that can interfere with yours. If you merge completely, there are no two waves. There's just a flat line. You need the gap for the spark to jump.
That's profound. And speaking of others, the material takes a really fascinating turn into AI. It suggests something called a health scan mode.
This was one of the most surprising parts for me. The suggestion is we treat AI as a diagnostic atmosphere.
A diagnostic atmosphere. What does that mean?
The idea is instead of asking AI for the answer, you use it as a mirror. You engage with it to see your own position, your own bias, your blind spots reflected back at you.
So I'm not asking it to write my essay. I'm asking it to show me the holes in my thinking before I start.
Right, because the AI doesn't have our baggage. It doesn't have an ego to protect. The text talks about finding a new zero. The AI can help dissolve our old interference scars and return us to a clean state where we can observe clearly again.
I love that. Using AI not to think for us, but to help us see how we are thinking.
It's about cognitive hygiene, not just productivity.
Okay, so we've covered the mechanism, the problems, the tools. Now I want to get into the really deep theory. The source ends with what it calls the triad of interference. And I'll be honest, when I first saw the words, I rolled my eyes a little.
Let me guess. Love, gratitude, and spiral.
Yep, sounds like something on a throw pillow. But the definitions, they completely change the game.
We have to be really careful here not to let them drift into sentimentality. They're being used like variables in an equation.
Right. Let's start with love. It says love is the 0 point.
In this framework, love is not an emotion. It's not romance. It is defined as the probability density of existing with others.
Probability density. Okay, break that down.
Think of it as the fundamental condition that allows connection to be possible at all. It's the math that says it is possible for you and I to occupy the same meaningful space. It is the 0 point, the origin.
So love is the open door, the potential. Then comes gratitude, which the text calls the vector.
The direction. Gratitude is the acknowledgement that interference has occurred. When you feel that, in this structural sense, you're validating the event. You are saying, this became a connection. And in doing so, you give the chaos a direction. You order time.
So if love opens the door, gratitude is acknowledging someone walked through it, which leaves the spiral.
The spiral is the phase, the continuation. Meaning, it argues, is not a circle.
We aren't just hamsters on a wheel.
We shouldn't be. A circle just repeats the same thing.
Right.
But we always face the same human problems, right? So the shape of meaning is a spiral. We come back to the same issues, but if we're generating meaning, we come back to them at a different height, a different phase.
That's actually really reassuring, because life can feel so repetitive. You think, why am I dealing with this again? The spiral says, you're dealing with it differently this time.
Exactly. You've maintained the orbit, but you've gained altitude. Love creates the spark, gratitude gives it direction, and the spiral sustains the movement. That's the whole equation.
It's a beautiful system. And it brings us right back to the beginning. The goal isn't to solve the world, it's just to keep the spiral moving.
To maintain the breadth of observation.
Which leads us to how the material ends.
Yeah.
It just refuses to give a conclusion, which for a deep dive is normally frustrating. You want the takeaway.
It has to refuse. A conclusion would be a fixed point. It would stop the orbit. It stays true to its own method of continuous generation. It has to leave us with questions.
So we're going to do the same. We're not wrapping this up. Instead, I'm going to leave you, our listener, with the 3 inquiries from the text. Think of them as diagnostic scripts for your own OS.
Carry these with you. See what happens.
Question 1. If thought is evaluated by resonance rather than proof, what do you keep?
Not is it true, but does it ring true?
Question 2. Does your observation still contain space? Do you have that yohaku, or is your buffer full?
And the final one.
At what moment does meaning emerge for you?
Not what does it mean, but when does it happen? Watch for the spark.
This isn't about owning a theory. It's about maintaining that breath. Thanks for diving in with us.
Keep the space open.